Hello, this is Faith at Faith and Books. How are you doing? I am celebrating the fact that I have now 350 subscribers, which is absolutely amazing to me because I never thought about subscribers when I wanted to join BookTube. I just wanted to talk about books, and I just wanted a vehicle for talking about books. And I don't edit. I have absolutely no capacity to make videos. I just record on my phone, and I don't know how to edit. I don't know how to do anything. So it's not like I'm, creating clever, attractive, artistic content or anything like that. I just get on and babble, and I'm usually just trying to get it in, just sort of scrambling to get something in and up. And it always takes longer than I think it will. Anyway, I'm just grateful that people have subscribed because I just like talking about books. And I do have people I can talk to in real life, but not at the same level of intensity. And BookTube for me has really, really added to the quality of my life. I really enjoy it. I think I just have kind of a permanent, it's not permanent, but it's taking a long time for the COVID, I think, to clear up. And it did something to my voice, and I just have this chronic cough now. Anyway, so yes, I wanted to thank all my subscribers. Thank you so much. And I got to this 350 number, which, I don't know, seems significant. So, but really this video is about the third part of my three-parter on ranking Victorian novels. Now, as you can tell, I'm a very bad ranker. I'm not like, numbering them, 1 to 62 or anything like that. But I'm just sort of generally ranking them. So the first part, I ranked 25 Victorian novels that I had read. This is over the course of my whole life. And I forgot to talk about Dracula. I had always avoided Dracula until a few years ago when my son-in-law actually said, I think you would really enjoy Dracula. I was like, really? I'd never been attracted to vampires. They just seemed kind of sleazy. I just wasn't into it. But when I read it, I was really charmed by it. I really, I didn't realize it was a truly Victorian novel. So it's got all that quaint, those quaint aspects of a Victorian novel. It's epistolatory, so it's letters going back and forth. I thought it was very atmospheric, the way Bram Stoker describes Dracula's castle, and the way he, there's that scene towards the end there where they're trapped in the snow on the road and the sun is going down, or earlier they were near an asylum and discussed kind of that whole atmosphere. I really thought it was very atmospheric, and I liked all that tension. I thought that was well done. And I just love the idea of it being this tiny band of people, of friends, who were trying to, fight this horrible evil in the world that only they really knew about. And I really liked the character of Mina. She was my favorite. And I thought that, what was his name, Van Helsing, was a very interesting character as well. So yeah, I was charmed by Dracula, and I was so surprised by it because I did not expect to like it at all. So anyways, that was one of the novels that I forgot to talk about in the first part. My second part was the three authors that I struggle with, and that's Hardy, and and then the Bronte family. Though I do like Anne Bronte, and I did like Agnes Grey, and I do want to read The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. I want to get around to that at some point. And then Dickens, my struggle with Dickens. I like Dickens in theory. I just haven't read very much, and I don't seem to be able to motivate myself to read more. I am working through the Pickwick Papers right now, though, so that could be ending. I'm managing to read 2 more Dickens in the last couple of years, including this Pickwick Papers. So that was the last time. And then this one is about my 3 favorite Victorian authors. Now, probably by process of elimination, you might have figured it out. But my top 3 are Elizabeth Gaskell, George Eliot, and Anthony Trollope. And a few years ago, I would have said Elizabeth Gaskell was the top. I was really immersed in her and reading her a lot. And right now I'm finishing up listening to Mary Barton again, and I really think that's my favorite one by her, even though it's her very first one, and I recognize it has some flaws. I really, really love that novel. I so wanted to write a screenplay, but I might still. It's just been a hard fall, taking care of kids and COVID and RSV. Is that what it's called? Respiratory something virus that the little kids got, and it's just been so hectic. I can't even go into all the detail. So, and Octobers tend to be like that for me. It's just not the best time of the year to be starting off a big project. But maybe I will. Maybe I will write a screenplay of Mary Barton. Or if you want to do it, I hand it off to you. If you want to attempt it. I do think it would make a great movie or miniseries. I really do. Anyway, I'm going to link, though, to a couple of videos that I happened to catch this weekend. One is Brian at Bookish, and he had just finished reading North and South, and he wasn't a fan. And I think he gives valid criticisms. He's very generous in his criticism, but it just didn't appeal to him. And then Charles Heathcote DNF'd North and South, and he's got more of an emotional response to it. But, he's so entertaining. I really like his channel. So I will link to two, just to be fair, just as in Hardy. I don't like Hardy, but there are people out there who love Hardy, and I respect them. And I love Elizabeth Gaskell, and there are people out there who don't get along with Elizabeth Gaskell, and that's fine. So yeah, I think Mary Barton would be my favorite right now. I don't know. I don't have the brain with bandwidth or whatever to actually sit down and link and rate all of them. But yeah, so Elizabeth Gaskell. Then I would say George Elliot. Now, George Elliot, I have not read as much of her stuff. I started, though, very young. I read Silas Marner, I think in high school. And then I know I read it again because I just found it charming. And then when I was in law school, I had a friend named Louise. And I remember standing next to her locker at the school, and she pulled out this book, and she said, I just finished reading this really great book. And she showed it to me, and I noticed that the author was George Elliot. And I said, oh, I've only read Silas Marner by George Elliot. And she said, oh, you've got to read that. You've got to read this. It's really good. And it was Adam Bede. So I still have that copy of that book. I think I still do. So I took it, and instead of studying for law, I read Adam Bede. And then years later, when I was married with children, I remember rereading it. And I think I caught part of the BBC series where the BBC's series of Adam Bede. Was it Susanna Harker? Is that her name? She played Jane in Pride and Prejudice, but then she played Dinah in Adam Bede. Anyway, I really enjoyed that miniseries. I didn't see the whole thing, but I did see parts of it. So, yeah, so that was Adam Bede. But then I did see the whole thing of Middlemarch that they put out, and the BBC. And I remember I watched it with my husband for some reason, because a lot of times I would have trouble watching a whole miniseries at that time in my life. Sometimes I was just too tired, or something would come up, and I just couldn't. That was back before the day of where you could stream things, or Netflix, or whatever. You had to be able to sit in front of the TV at a particular time in the evening. But I did watch all of Middlemarch. I was really entranced by it. And then I went out to the library and I got the book and I read it. That was a long time ago. I was still living in our other house. We've been in this house for 21 years. So that's how long ago it was. So I remember, though, enjoying it. And then I didn't read any more George Elliot until I started BookTube just 3 years ago. And one January, somebody was reading Romula. And I joined in that read-along, and I loved it. It just gobsmacked me. That's what I always say about George Elliot. I just think her works are stunning. And so Romula just is such a magnificent novel. I really loved it. And then what was the next thing I read after Romula? Oh, and then this past January, I read Felix Holt because my little grandson Felix was born on January 14th, and I wanted to read that novel in January. And so it just was a coincidence that I had read Romula the January before, and then I read Felix Holt this January. And I actually really like reading George Elliot in January, because January is the time when I would do my own personal Victober. You know, the Christmas rush is over. I'm, in my hemisphere, it's dark and gloomy. The skies are usually overcast, and it's chilly and raw out, and I just want to be inside. And that's when I want to bury myself in a long, absorbing book, which is what George Elliot delivers. So I sort of, in my head, because of the last 2 Januaries, I made January George Elliot month for me. And this January, I want to reread Middlemarch. And so I invite anybody who wants to join in with that, please read with me. I think that would be great to buddy read with somebody, or we could have a little group. So I'll put that in the description in case anyone's interested. And then, having COVID a couple of weeks ago, I read Scenes from Clerical Lives. I never get the title right, but I just absolutely love that, and I did a review of it a couple of weeks ago. So now I still have to read Daniel Deronda and Mill on the Floss, The Mill on the Floss. So I'm a little bit afraid of Mill on the Floss because I've heard things, but we'll see. I might make that my last book that I read by George Elliot of her major works. So George Elliot would be my second, and my top favorite author, although as I said in the part 2, my very favorite Victorian novel is David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, because that's just what I think of when I think, if you say Victorian novel, that's the novel that pops into my head. But my favorite author is Anthony Trollope right now. I have been reading him the last couple of years. So by the end of this year, God willing, I will have read 13 of his novels. So I started when I was young, in my early 20s. I watched Barchester Towers, the BBC series, with my mother. She loved Anthony Trollope. She read everything that he wrote. And so I enjoyed watching that so much with her. That's such a memory for me of having that time with my mom. And that made me go out and read The Warden and Barchester Towers. And I enjoyed them both, and then I didn't read anything more for years. And then, again, there was another BBC series that came on, He Knew He Was Right. And I think I watched most of that. I think I got to watch most of that. And I thought it was really well done, and so I went out and got the book and read He Knew He Was Right. Really enjoyed that one. So that made me decide I was going to try again, to try to read the Barchester Chronicles. So I reread The Warden, and I reread Barchester Towers, and then once again I just stalled out. And I have to say I love The Warden. A lot of people dismiss it, and they say just read Barchester Towers. Like in the interview that Kate Howe did, the guy from the Anthony Trollope Society suggested that. But I really like The Warden. It's a character sketch. And I love the character of Septimus Harding. He's just so dear to me. If I could, if you're having one of those dinner parties where you can invite 7 people from novels to your party, I would invite him. I just loved him. And I loved Barchester Towers too. So anyway, so 3 years ago, for some reason, and I don't remember why, I ran into the library and I had about 5 minutes and I wanted to listen to an audiobook. I can't remember why, because I don't do it that often. But they happened to have on the shelf The Small House at Allington by Anthony Trollope. I didn't even remember it was part of the Barchester series. But I just grabbed it because I didn't have any time and I wanted a book. And I listened to it. I wish I could remember who the reader was. It just transfixed me. It seared into my heart. I love that. I love that book. And I love the character of Lily Dale. And she just, I know it's a sad book. It's a very sad book, and I was heartbroken after listening to it. I just loved it. So it made me go decide I was really going to read the series. So I went back and I reread The Warden. I reread Barchester Towers. Finally got around to Dr. Thorne, which I was a bit, I don't know, that one didn't impress me as much as the others, although other people really love Dr. Thorne. So I feel like I need to reread it, see what I'm missing. And then Framley Parsonage, and then I did not reread The Small House at Allington because, believe it or not, I was still too heartbroken over it. I think now that a couple of years have passed, I could take it again. But at that time, I didn't feel like I could, so I skipped that part, even though I just heard it, you know, like I think I listened to it in December, and then I started rereading in January. And then I read the Last Chronicle of Barset, which is just a magnificent tying up of the whole series. I just thought it was brilliant. I had such a book hangover, which is a bad term because hangovers, you feel really sick. But I was floating. I was like on a cloud. Reality wasn't real. You know, that book, Barchester, was real. All those characters were real. And I was just, you know, it took me a while to get over it. It was just almost euphoric. So then this year, I've been reading the Pallister series, although I actually started last year. So what happened was I read Can You Forgive Her in September, which a lot of people have trouble getting into, and it might be kind of slow at the beginning, and the main character is the one you have to forgive is a little maddening because she overthinks everything. And she thinks she's smarter than she actually is. She doesn't have good instinct. She has good instincts for other people, but not for herself. She overthinks everything to the most annoying degree. But there was enough in the beginning of the book that kept me going, and I was very entertained by it. And then it becomes really good. So I really enjoyed Can You Forgive Her? Then I read Phineas Finn in October because my grandson Phineas was being born in October. So that was a year ago because his birthday, I believe, is tomorrow. Yeah, so I read Phineas Finn, and then I started up with Christina at Knitting Books and Things, her read-along of the Pallisters when they started with, I joined in at the Eustace Diamonds, which I thought was brilliant. I thought that was such a good book. I loved the main character. It really, it was like classic Anthony Trollope. And now and then I read Phineas Redux, which I wasn't as impressed with, and I think I did a review recently. And now I'm reading The Prime Minister, and I'm very much enjoying it. But I have to say, I'm a little put out with the anti-Semitism in Trollope. I have a problem with it, and it's not just because my husband's Jewish, but because, and I actually have some Jewish descent in me. My great-great-grandfather was Samuel Gompers. But it's just in retrospect, when you look back and you see all that anti-Semitism in the Victorian novels, and it's very much there in Anthony Trollope, and you know what it led to. All that European anti-Semitism led to the Holocaust, and you know, it's hard to swallow. It's hard to for me, it's hard to dismiss it. I have to I always have to talk myself down. You know, okay, it's the context. You know, this is where it was written. Nobody's perfect. You know, this is the time period. But it's a little bit horrifying. So I do grapple with that. And right now, anti-Semitism is really irritating me a lot. So that aspect of this story, and it's very much there in this particular plot, is I'm finding abrasive. But I found, and I'll link to it, an article, I really like this article of somebody talking about reading, you know, how to deal with anti-Semitism in Anthony Trollope, if you're a real person who loves Trollope. So I think since I've read so many of his books in the last 3 years, I mean, 13 books, that's more than Gaskell, that's more than Eliot, that's more than Dickens, that's more than any other Victorian author that I've read. So I think he gets to be number one in my ranking. So anyway, I will link below to everything I referenced and maybe other things that I forgot to reference while I'm talking. And I'm going to, what time is it? Oh yeah, I gotta get busy. All right, well, I thank you for my 350 subscribers, and I hope you're doing well, and I hope this was worthwhile, and happy reading. Bye-bye.